Welcome to the Deep Dive. As you know, here on the Public Gems podcast, we love digging into those films, those older movies and shows that really made a mark.
Yeah, the foundational stuff.
Exactly. And today, we've got a really fascinating one from 1936, H.G. Wells' Things to Come.
A landmark film, truly.
It really is. And
Yeah.
it's not just, an old sci-fi movie. Our sources, production notes, reviews, all sorts, show it was startlingly prophetic. Almost eerie, some of it.
Definitely.
So our mission today is to unpack all that. We've sifted through everything to pull out the key bits, the really important stuff for you.
And it's a deep dive that I think really shows how this film, coming from Wells, this legendary author,
Right.
it wasn't just about cool special effects for the time.
Right.
It pushed filmmaking boundaries, sure, but it also gave us this stark vision of the future. Stark, but maybe ultimately a little hopeful too.
We'll see about that. It's definitely a major piece of cinematic design and just sheer intellectual foresight. Okay, so let's dive in. The man himself, H.G. Wells. His 1933 book, The Shape of Things to Come, that was the starting point, right?
That's the basis, yeah. But it's interesting. Our sources say he actually described the book as more of a discussion, not really a novel in the traditional
discussion.
sense.
So what was the big idea he was wrestling with there, and how did that translate to the film? Did he actually get to, shape the movie?
Well, that's key. The producer, Alexander Korda, apparently really admired Wells, a huge admirer.
Okay.
And he promised Wells complete creative control over the script, which, back then, that was incredibly rare for an author.
Wow, yeah. Unheard of almost.
Pretty much. So Wells adapted his own book, but he also pulled in ideas from his other writings, things like A Story of the Days to Come and the work Wealth and Happiness of Mankind.
So he was weaving it all together.
Exactly. It all fed into this grand theory he had about human progress. He believed humanity was sort of inevitably moving towards a stable world government. Maybe painful getting there, but inevitable.
Right. And the film was his platform for that.
Yeah, he saw cinema as this really powerful way to get his social commentary, his future predictions out there.
Okay, but hang on. Despite being a genius, his first attempt at a script treatment, Wither Mankind, our sources say it was, well, terrible.
Huh. Yes, apparently so. And Korda himself called Things to Come his most difficult film to make.
So not exactly smooth sailing then.
Not at all. And it really shows you how hard it is, right, to take these big, complex, maybe even a bit preachy ideas and turn them into a movie that people actually want to watch, something compelling.
Yeah, visual storytelling is different.
Completely, but they were committed. They threw a lot of money at it. The budget was huge for 1936, somewhere between £260,000 and £300,000.
Right.
And they really pushed Wells's involvement. It wasn't just behind the scenes. The marketing was all H.G. Wells's Things to Come. His name was the brand.
And the artistry went beyond just Wells. Right?
Yeah.
The music, for instance, Arthur Bliss. Wells chose him.
He did. And here's something really wild. Apparently, the film was edited to the score.
Wait, edited to the score, not the other way around.
Exactly. They had the music first, and then they cut the visuals to match its rhythm and mood. Super unconventional.
That is unusual. Puts the music right at the heart of it.
It really does. And Bliss even turned the score into a concert suite that got performed widely, so the music stood on its own, too.
And visually, the look of the future.
Oh, groundbreaking stuff there, too. Vincent Korda, the producer's brother, he did the art design. He created every town, this massive futuristic city.
Based on London, I read.
Yeah, based on London. You can even see this kind of stark modernist version of St. Paul's Cathedral in some shots. Like, the old world is still lurking there.
And the costumes. Wells had ideas there, too.
Oh, yeah. He pictured the future leaders, these, technocrats, the scientists and engineers running things. He saw them resembling samurai.
Samurai. Interesting. Like a disciplined elite warrior class, but for science.
Kind of, yeah. And another fascinating bit, Wells apparently openly mocked Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Really? Why?
He saw his own vision in Things to Come as, realistic projections. Things that could actually happen based on current technology or rocketry, aviation, that sort of thing. He thought Metropolis was too fantastical, too expressionistic.
So he was aiming for plausible sci-fi, not just fantasy.
Exactly. Grounded speculation. They even hired this abstract artist, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, to do some special effects sequences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, though apparently only about 90 seconds of his stuff actually made it into the final film.
Still, it just shows the sheer scale of the effort, the different kinds of talent they were bringing together to build this world.
Absolutely. It was this huge, ambitious project trying to bring Wells's very specific future to life. And you feel that ambition watching it.
Okay, so we have this incredible vision, this massive production effort. What's the actual story they tell? It covers a huge span of time, right?
It does. Nearly a century. It starts in 1940 in this city called Everytown.
Yeah.
You know, a bustling London analog.
Right before the war.
Exactly. And we meet John Cabal, played by Raymond Massey. He's worried, really anxious about war breaking out, but his friend, Pippa Passworthy, he's more optimistic. Maybe war will speed up technology, he thinks.
Famous last words.
Pretty much. That very night, boom, air raid sirens, bombs fall on every town. It's the start of a global war.
The Second World War, basically, as well as predicted.
Yes. And in the film, this war just drags on and on into the 1960s. It's so long and devastating that people eventually forget why they were even fighting.
Oh, wow.
Society just collapses. Cities are ruins, money's worthless, technology breaks down. It's a new dark age.
And then things get even worse, don't they? There's this plague.
Ah, yes, the wandering sickness. This is where it gets really chillingly predictive, or maybe just tapped into deep fears.
How does it work in the film?
Well, the sources suggest it's actually spread by the bombing itself, ironically, and it makes people just wander aimlessly, almost like zombies, before they collapse and die.
That sounds terrifyingly familiar now.
Doesn't it? It wipes out the last remnants of government, kills maybe half of humanity. It's Wells showing how war doesn't just destroy directly. It breeds these other horrors, these cascading failures, like public health collapsing.
Really bleak picture.
Utterly bleak. So by 1970, every town is just this small, ruined settlement ruled by a local warlord. Rudolph, they call him the boss.
Played by Ralph Richardson, right? Great actor.
Fantastic actor. And this solution to the wandering sickness. He just shoots anyone infected. Brutal pragmatism.
He's still fighting wars.
Oh, yeah. Now he's fighting his neighbors for coal and shale, anything to get fuel for his few remaining ancient biplanes. It really makes you think, how accurately did Wells see this potential for societal collapse, for resource wars, even for something like a pandemic?
It's quite something.
Yeah.
But then hope arrives, or something different.
Well, something new arrives. On May Day in 1970, John Cabal, the same guy from 1940, now much older, flies in.
In what?
In this sleek, modern monoplane. Nothing like the boss's old planes. A complete shock.
Where is he from?
He represents an organization called Wings Over the World. They're based in Basra, in Iraq. It's this group of scientists, engineers, mechanics.
The technocrats Wells envisioned.
Exactly. And they've decided war is obsolete. They've outlawed it amongst themselves and are basically rebuilding civilization starting in the Near East.
How does the boss take that?
Not well. He sees Cabal and Wings Over the World as a threat to his power. He refuses their offer to join, takes Cabal prisoner, wants him to fix his old planes.
Uh-oh.
But Cabal manages to get a message out with help from one of the boss's own mechanics who's kind of fed up. And then Wings Over the World shows up in force.
Big planes.
Huge flying wing aircraft. Gigantic things, but they don't drop bombs. They release this gas, the gas of peace.
Gas of peace sounds ominous.
Right. It knocks everyone in every town out peacefully. They wake up, and Wings Over the World is in charge. The boss. He conveniently died from an allergic reaction to the gas.
Tidy. So, problem solved. Utopia begins.
Cabal promises a new age. And the film jumps forward again to 2036. And yeah, on the surface, it looks like utopia.
How so?
Humanity lives in these incredible modern underground cities. Every town is rebuilt, sleek and efficient. Everyone's devoted to peace, science, progress. Wings Over the World, led by Cabal's descendants, runs everything.
But there's always a but in these stories.
There is indeed. Even in this apparent utopia, there's unrest. A sculptor named Theodokopoulos.
Catchy name.
Yeah. He starts stirring things up. He argues people are tired of all this constant progress, this relentless push forward. They need a rest.
A rest from progress.
Exactly. And the symbol of this relentless progress they rally against is the upcoming first manned flight around the moon. They're planning to launch it from this massive space gun.
A space gun, not rockets.
Yeah, giant cannon, basically.
Okay.
Very Jules Verne, which is interesting, as we'll get to.
Yeah.
But the mob, stirred up by Theotokopoulos, threatens to destroy the space gun.
So what happens?
Oswald Cabal, John Cabal's grandson, now running things, he's forced to launch the space gun early, ahead of schedule, to save it from the mob.
With people inside?
Yes. His own daughter, Catherine, and another scientist, Maurice Passworthy, the son of Cabal's old friend from 1940. They get shot towards the moon.
Wow. And how does the film end?
It ends with this really intense philosophical debate. Oswald Cabal is talking to Passworthy's father, who's obviously distraught, worried about his son. They argue about progress, about humanity's destiny, about whether we should ever stop striving.
In Cabal's final line.
It's chilling. He looks up at the stars and says, "All the universe or nothingness, which shall it be?"
Whew. Heavy stuff.
Really heavy. It perfectly captures that core theme, right? This constant tension Wells saw between our destructive side and this almost inhuman drive for progress, for reaching the stars. Does progress save us or just create new problems?
A question we're still asking.
Absolutely. As relevant now as it was then.
And speaking of relevance, let's talk about those predictions. The forecasts. Some of them are just astonishingly accurate. You mentioned the Second World War.
Yeah, the book version of the script explicitly called it the Second World War. Bang on.
And the bombing of Everytown.
It's basically a direct preview of the Blitz on London, which happened just a few years later, 1940-41. The visuals are eerily similar.
That's incredible. I also read something about Hitler and Chamberlain.
Yeah, this is wild. Michael Korda, the producer's nephew, wrote that Hitler actually saw the film and told Goering, the head of the Luftwaffe, to use it as inspiration for bombing tactics.
No way. That's horrifying.
It really is. But then, conversely, some sources say the film's depiction of war's horror might have actually strengthened Neville Chamberlain's desire for peace, his appeasement policy.
Wow. So it had this really complex, double-edged impact on real-world leaders.
Seems like it. Talk about art influencing life.
And the wandering sickness, we touched on it, but its similarity to later zombie tropes is pretty striking.
It is. That image of people just aimlessly walking before dying. It definitely feels like a precursor to the whole post-apocalyptic zombie genre that came much later.
And technically, you mentioned the helicopter.
Right. It shows a helicopter design before they'd really figured out stable helicopter flight. Crucially, the one in the film doesn't have a tail rotor, which turned out to be essential. So Wells was projecting the idea of vertical flight, even if the specifics weren't quite right yet.
Which fits his approach, feasible tech, not magic.
Exactly. Although, interestingly, Arthur C. Clarke, Mr. 2001 himself, was apparently puzzled why Wells went with the space gun for the moonshot.
Because Wells knew about rockets.
Yeah, Wells was aware of rocketry principles. Clarke thought the space gun was a bit old-fashioned, more Verne than Wells.
But Clarke still respected the film.
Oh, hugely. In fact, Clarke made Stanley Kubrick watch Things to Come when they were starting work on 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Wow. So Things to Come directly influenced 2001.
It seems so. It really highlights the film's status as, like, a grandfather to modern sci-fi cinema, even with bits that seem dated now, like the space gun, its ambition, its scope, its visual ideas. They clearly left a huge mark. It set a template.
How did critics react back in 1936? Did they get its importance?
They definitely recognized its power. The Times newspaper loved the concepts and the visuals, calling the scenery incomparable and the real triumph.
And the New York Times.
Frank Nugent at the New York Times had this really chilling observation. He said parts of the film felt like direct quotations from last week's newspapers, which, for a film about a future war made in 36, that's unsettlingly prescient.
Yeah, that sends a shiver down your spine.
And later critics.
They've cemented its legacy.
Sure.
Sci-fi historian Gary Westfall called it the first true masterpiece of science fiction cinema. And significantly, the greatest ancestor of Stanley Kubrick's 2001.
High praise. Very high. And Christopher Frayling, a cultural historian, called it a landmark in cinematic design. Its score holds up too. The AFI, the American Film Institute, nominated it as one of the best film scores. And Rotten Tomatoes. It sits at a pretty impressive 93%.
So, critically acclaimed, influential.
Yeah.
Did it make money? You said the budget was huge.
Yeah, that high budget initially made it tough for Korda to recoup the costs. This wasn't an immediate smash hit financially.
Okay.
But over time, through re-releases and television airings, it eventually did turn a profit. It earned its place as a true public gem in that sense, too.
And people can watch it today. What version should they look for? I heard there were different cuts.
There were. Censor snipped bits out, reissues shortened it. It went from maybe 130 minutes originally down to even 72 minutes at one point, but thankfully there's a digitally restored version readily available now. It runs about 96 minutes.
That sounds like the one to see.
Definitely. And often the releases have great extras, like that Moholy-Nagy abstract footage that didn't make the original cut. Really fascinating stuff to see.
Sure. It sounds like a film whose impact just keeps reverberating.
I think so.
Right.
Technically, visually, philosophically, it asks these huge questions about where we're headed.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've done a pretty deep dive into Things to Come, a film that was absolutely a product of its time, those pre-war anxiety,
The hopes and fears.
but also looked incredibly far ahead. It's just a powerful example of how cinema can tackle these massive questions about humanity.
Visual grandeur, but also real intellectual weight. It forces you to think about progress. Is it always good? What's the cost? Do we as a species really want constant change? Or do we crave stability, maybe even that rest Theodor Kopulos called for?
So thinking about that for you, our listener.
Yeah, what does this film mean for you?
Given that final huge question from Wells, all the universe or nothingness, which shall it be?
Yeah.
And thinking about the film's warnings, about war, about societal breakdown, even about pandemics, the wandering sickness, what kind of future do you think we are building right now? Are we aiming for the universe or something else? And what are the modern wandering sicknesses, literal or maybe metaphorical, that could still trip us up?
Big questions to ponder.
Definitely. We really recommend you seek out Things to Come. It's a truly remarkable, thought-provoking piece of cinema history. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a genuine cinematic prophecy.